Hello, it's me, and look what we're going to be making today, a perky little pollinator. So this fun creation is going to be made with epoxy clay and some liquid polymer clay and some paper and some fibers and all kinds of other little embellishments, just because it's fun. So, want to join me in my little studio here in Maui and make something buzzy? Come on. You will need wire cutter and plier and some stiffer wire. This is copper. It can be any color that you want. And this particular stuff is 18 gauge. I recommend either a 20 gauge or an 18 gauge. And then we'll just manipulate this into the wings. You will need some paper. Can be anything. I recommend, if you can get your hands on some sort of like a natural fiber paper. This is a handmade paper with a lot of fibers. I think that looks great. It absorbs the liquid clay that we're going to use to turn it into the wings really well. And it allows for lots of stuff to be glued on it. But hey, any paper can work. I just recommend one with some fiber in it because it's more better. So we're going to need liquid clay and an embossing gun or a heat tool to add to the wings. There's other ways to do it, but this is how I'm going to do it for this particular project. I use the Primo brand of type of clay, which is in the Sculpey brand. So I'm using translucent liquid Sculpey, but any kind of liquid clay will do. So we'll need that, and then we're going to work on a tile because that works really good with the heat gun to absorb the heat and have a nice flat surface for this all to work on. You'll need some glue. It can be just any kind of white glue, paper glue, craft glue. I grabbed Elmer's. You can grab Eileen's. Whatever you've got, that's a nice craft glue. We're going to draw our own wings, so you just need a piece of paper and something to draw with and something to cut it out with. I figure you have that lying around, but just in case it's in a box somewhere underneath another box in a closet in another room, go get it. I've got an assortment of things that I'll use to decorate the wings with. I'm not even sure which ones I'll use right now, but I have some little bits of glittery stars and some thread, embroidery thread kind of stuff, mylar flakes, some paper. We'll also maybe use some powders. I'm going to be using a little bit of paint brushes to apply of various kinds. Just an assortment of things that could be used to decorate the wings. We will be using epoxy sculpt or whatever epoxy clay that you have. This is my epoxy clay brand of choice. I really love it. And most epoxy clays, if not all epoxy clays, are 2-part. And you mix them together and then they become a hardened cement piece, which we will be talking all about. This is the larger size. We don't need that much. If you have the small 1/10 of a pound size, that's perfectly plenty. And then you want to have some kind of non-stick surface to work on. This is a silicone sheet, which I love and use these all the time, but you can even use like a plastic wrap or even a Ziploc baggie if you wanted to. And I suggest a pair of disposable gloves for mixing the epoxy sculpt. All right? You're going to need tools. Now, what I've got here is just the assortment that I used, and you may have other ones that you like. I use, let me find the other one. I use sculpting tools. This is the Wow It's Awesome tool from my own collection, which I love. Of course, you can use a needle tool or any kind of sculpting tool that you have. This is a scratch tool, and this is just a tool that has some stiff wires on it, and it's good for making like a fluffy texture. You can, again, use a needle tool or even a toothpick if you don't have a scratch tool. This one's really handy, though. I use a craft blade for part of the project, so if you've got that one around, that's great. And then things to pick up and place embellishments. So these are both pickup tools. They're little wax-tipped tools, and I love this one because this end right here is really great for pushing things in. And then, of course, a trusty pair of needle nose tweezers, whether that's straight or bent, they both work the same to help pick up and place things. So gather these tools. Now, depending on the color combination that you choose for the details on the wings, like I showed you what I use, the different threads and papers and such, you're going to want to echo those colors perhaps, or use a contrasting or nice color to go with it in the body of our little sweet bug. So I've got a combination of things that I'm probably going to use. I've got a couple of little purple stone cabochons, and you could use glass, rhinestone, whatever you want, but I like these sort of round cabochons for the eyes. That'll work out great. Then I've got an assortment of things that might work for the stripes on the body. I found these little funky fun sequins, which I might add here and there for some detail. I went ahead and got some assortment of little black beads because the body will be black, and I'll probably put a combination of either black beads or black rhinestones on that body. And I just have some gold head pins just in case that's helpful. So everybody's stash of things that you use will be different, and the things that you choose are going to be different. But what I'm basically looking at is a couple of strands of strung beads to make the stripes easy. And this is silver silk, which is a knitted wire, which it's got like a ball chain inside of it, and that might be fun. And then, of course, rhinestones or other little things, whatever you've got that will decorate the pollinator's body. Okay, so go see what you have in your stash depending on the colors that you've chosen. I am going with sort of a orangey, yellowy orange, and a pink, basically, is where I'm going with that. All right. As you know, I often try to figure out what I'm going to do looks like by sort of sketching and refining my idea. So I had initially the idea of doing some sort of a pollinator that was bee-like, and then I meandered around for, as you can tell, quite a bit of scribbles, something more bee-like, something less bee-like, something with flowers, just kind of playing with this. Do I want legs on it, do or not? What if I did a different bug altogether that was sort of halfway between a moth and a cicada? These are some of the ways that helps me refine what this will look like, what the proportions are that I like. And I felt like I wanted it to be a little less buggy, a little bit more stylized, because I love bugs. I love their antenna and legs and weird bits, but not everybody does. And when I make these projects, I'm trying to find something that has a broad appeal so that all of the different people that follow me or get inspiration by me will find a place to land within the idea that I'm doing. So in that sense, I sort of focus what I want to do, but then filter it through what I want to share that will be most acceptable and fun. And so finally, I kind of took all of these things down and scribbled it back down to sort of, again, a pollinator that I wanted to keep it sort of bee-like, so big round body, fuzziness, eyeballs, maybe antennas, maybe not. We'll just see how that goes. Accentuating on the wings and not putting any legs or anything in, like big, fuzzy, warm body, fun wings. And then I also, as I'm thinking about it, like, well, what do I want to make this out of? And this one is evolving itself into a combination of epoxy clay and paper and other fun stuff like that. And there'll be some polymer clay involved. We'll just see where this takes us. And incorporating gems. And I've written my little ideas, and maybe this will have paper with wire with cutout stuff or drawing on it or fuzzy bits or whatever. So this is kind of where I start. And this is where I've landed. We'll see as we go along where it actually goes. Because what I've been doing lately, instead of like making a prototype, working out all the bugs, and then showing you how to do what I just did, is I come up with the idea the way I would normally do when I'm just creating for myself. And I'm walking it through organically as it's happening in real time, unfolding with you, the actual thing as it is being born. So that means along the way, there might be a thing that doesn't turn out the way I thought, and we have to fix it. which I think is very helpful for me to show you, because that's how it is. I have come to this conclusion that life is messy. Creativity is messy. And instead of avoiding the mess, lean into it, because in the mess lies beauty. And so embracing that process when something goes in a direction you didn't expect, now what does that give you in terms of choices? So we're going to kind of play with that as we go and see if messes arrive, what will we do with them? And also they go off in their own weird little tangents. Like I said, on this bunch of scribbling, I was kind of feeling very bee-like and then, just generic-y buggy. But then this little guy over here, which I'm going to explore later because I love that look. I love this weird, big, triangular cicada-looking thing, or cicada, depending on how you like to pronounce it, with these big, sort of floppy, out-of-control wings. I'm going to play with that later because that amuses me, and that happens sort of organically as I'm exploring. So anyway, I offer this to you as an insight into how the process of swimming in this creative ether works for me, because maybe that will give you some thoughts on how it can work for you. It's different for everybody. All right, so with pollinator in mind, let's go. How big you make your bug is totally up to you. I'm going to make mine big enough to be very decorative, just for fun, and give me some space to play on the wings. So the very first thing I'm going to do is just take a piece of paper to draw out the wings. So I am not exactly sure what my wings want to look like. Do I want them to be like this or some other shape? Now this part won't be visible really in there, but I think that is pretty good. And I'm folding it in half to remind myself that it's going to be a double set of wings, but also these wings have to have some space in the middle for the bug's body, right? Which needs to be probably about that long. So I'm going to now refold this paper to kind of cut in the middle of that stretch right there. And then let's cut this out. This is going to be the pattern that I use for my wire, and ultimately for the cutout that I do of the paper. And you can make your wings just as fantastic and crazy as you wish, or something simple like this. And this is good, I think. It's a good size. It gives me plenty of room here because my bug body is actually going to be like about in here, right? So it gives me plenty of room for this to stretch inside the bug body. So I like that. And it fits just barely on my tile. In fact, for the purposes of this, because I want to make sure that it does stay on the tile, I'm going to just trim it down a little bit more, just to make it easier for us to kind of follow along here. All right. So now that should fit perfectly on the tile. All right, so get yourself a piece of paper, some scissors, and scribble around until you have a nice set of wings. And you may take this opportunity to go search in books, online, or wherever you find insect wings, and see the variety of shapes that there are out there for insect wings, and get inspired to be a little crazy. So what we're going to do now is we're going to be using paper to create the wings. We're going to have a piece above, a piece below that echoes out this same shape. But I want to use my wire to give some support to that shape, so it's not just going to flop all around. And this can be a little tricky, and I want to try to do it all with one piece of wire, some nice big piece of wire, so that I can make this whole thing all in one go. And that is a little bit tricky. So the easiest way I find is you use a wire that's nice and soft, and you just kind of bend as you go. And this is going to take a little bit of patience, all right? But mostly I'm just sort of holding it in place while I wander around the shape that I've made. And whenever there's a hard turning like that, that's when you want to grab it with your pliers and give it a good bend, all right? So that you get a nice, tight bending. And if it doesn't follow exactly, that's okay. Just see how close you can get it and just hold it as you go along. That's the easiest way I've found to do all of this. Now you notice that I'm going just slightly on the inside of the shape that I've made. And I'm sort of holding it in the areas that I've already made so it all kind of stays where it should be. That's the trickiest part, to make sure it all stays. So as I go along, it's maybe beneficial to kind of sometimes play with that so it's laying down a little flatter. And this is not going to be the part you see. It's going to be tucked inside the paper, but it is the sort of skeleton of the wing, so to speak. So you do want it to be as close as you can to the way this wing looks. Now, as you go along, it might get a little bit more tricky as you have more wing to hold. So I would suggest, you reposition your fingers and now just sort of follow it from this new place. And don't worry too much about what is over there that you've already done. You can go back and clean that all up as you go along. See how it's sort of wiggling all up and down and around. Let's try to get everything a bit more flat so can do any fine adjusting that we might need. Okay, I'd say that's looking pretty good, wouldn't you? So now it's just bending to keep it flat. This two-part where it sort of overlaps, I think it's important to make those things both kind of laying flat down onto the paper. All right, so now we have the basis of our shape. Pretty good. Okay, I'm going to cut this paper to make it more manageable, because essentially what I want is a top and a bottom. Now this paper has a top and a bottom. This side has like a weird little texture, so I'm going to make sure that, I remember what's the bottom, what's the top, and then we have our wire. So I would say that the easiest thing, I have two ways that I can do this. I can cut out the shape and then superimpose this on with the glue and make sure everything is held down, or I can just sort of sandwich it in place and then try to trim around it. I feel like once I've cut the shape out, that's a little bit easier then to manipulate so that it will all stay on. But I am going to kind of look it all over and make sure that this fits on the shape, because if I cut this shape out and then it doesn't fit very well, that's going to make it more challenging. So I'm going to take a few minutes to kind of tighten this up a little bit in here and see if there's an area. So this is doing great over there, but over here you can see how that needs to be adjusted a little bit so it stays inside. So let's just do that fine tuning to make it stay inside the shape. Now, if you get to the point where you're like, maybe I just need to change my shape, that's okay. If that's what you need to do, do it. But I think I'm going to be happy with that. So I'm going to cut this shape out of my bottom piece. I am actually going to kind of cut it bigger than the shape, and then I will cut it a little bit tighter later. This gives me a little bit more room for wiggle, and I can clean it up once everything is starting to come together. All right, so that's where we're going to start. There's our shape. All right, so now we want to attach this to the paper, sandwich it with the bigger piece of paper. All right, so the easiest way to actually do that is to turn this over, and we're then going to do this and lay that on top. Does that make sense? The other thing that I want to do is, you see how I've got lots of extra wire crisscrossing there? I'm going to take my wire cutter and just go and cut both of them at the same time. So now it's just flush together. There we go. All right, ready for the next bit. So you can use a craft glue or a school glue, Elmer's or whatever. Eileen's Craft is really good too. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just get some glue kind of in here and then around. Just kind of covering that whole area. All right? And then I'm going to take this, lay it on top, sandwich in that wire, feel it around, make sure that's covering up everything that I want to do. And then I'm actually going to take a couple more bits of my just crappy paper and really rub that to make it stick. I'm going to do that first rubbing to see if that wire is embedded, and usually you can just sort of hold it up and make sure it's kind of sticking up to the edge on this side. So I'll move it just a bit. Look at it again. All right, looking at it in the light kind of shows you where it's at, and it's looking great. Okay, and I'm just going to rub to make those attach. Now at this stage you have a couple of choices. What you can do to make this dry now is you can keep it sandwiched in this paper, get a new piece of paper if you want, or a piece of plastic wrap, which is kind of even better because you see how you've got some of that glue is sticking up and attaching itself to things, and you just kind of want that to dry, because then when it's done we'll decorate it and cut it and then start using our liquid clay to create a shiny surface. So letting this dry is the next reasonable step. If you're impatient, which I often am, you can use your heat gun. So we're going to try that and see how long it takes with the heat gun to dry up. Otherwise, just let it sit overnight and come back to it the next day. But I'm going to do this. The trick is just to make sure you keep going back and forth and keeping it warm but not burning in any one area. This is also why having a paper that has fiber in it is really smart, because it dries in a different way. And you see how I'm like pushing it down from time to time if an edge is sticking up. And, you know, don't forget that you can dry from the back side as well to get to those pockets of glue. And let's just play with this. So once you feel like this is dry, now we're going to carefully cut this piece out. Now you can just cut it out kind of big and then go back and cut it out more perfectly. I'm just going to do it all in one. I may regret it, but we'll see. And theoretically, the sides should be glued nicely together. If there's a gap, it's okay. If there's a lot of gaps, then you may want to go back and put a little bit more glue in and tighten those up. Okay, so this is the sort of thing you should have when we're done. A set of lovely paper wings. Okay, that looks really good, doesn't it? So now the next trick involves adding liquid clay to it, then some decoration, more liquid clay. Well, why? Couldn't we use something like Mod Podge or something like that? Absolutely. I just happen to have liquid clay around. I like the durability of it, so I'm going to use that. If you have something else you want to use, fabulous, go for it. So what I'm going to use with my liquid clay is a paintbrush, and I just happen to have a bunch of these very inexpensive paintbrushes, and this one's got like a flat square, which I like. And then when I'm done with this, I just sort of wrap it up in a little bit of plastic wrap and save it to the next time that I need to use my liquid clay. Now this is a new one because the last one I had was finally old enough and it was retired. But and actually when you retire it, a lot of times you can just cut all those little bristles off so that you're just left with this little nub, and that is a great texture tool, just saying. But anyway, what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to spread this, and there's really no front or back on this. It has a slight curve to it that I'm going to pretend is the front. You're going to want to spread this on, dry it with the heat gun as we go along, thin little layers, build it up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it on this back side first. Now I'm doing it directly on this tile because it will overflow the edges. Don't even worry about that. It'll dry onto the tile, peels right off, then we just trim it. And then I'm going to get all around the edges, make sure I've got that good. And we're just going to kind of do it in stages. So it'll take a little while to build up. And then we're going to get a couple of coats on here, and then we'll, you know, start decorating it a bit, okay? So I'm going to put like a little layer on here first, and then just see how far that goes with spreading it out, and see if I need to add more. But, you know, usually the first go round should be thin, and you should get it all the way out to the edges. This is not a sort of thing where thickness is going to make it go faster. It will actually make it go slower, because the thinner those layers are, the faster the heat gun will be able to dry them. And you could do one side at a time if you don't want to get yourself all messy. I have no aversion to being messy, but you may have a preference that's different. So I'm doing the back side first, then I'll do the front side, and then I'll do the sides, okay? So I feel like I got a pretty good layer on here. Just do a little bit here on this edge. I want to really make sure it gets all the way to the edge. It's easy to get a little shy of the very edge, and we want to make sure we don't do that. And make sure it's thin, okay? And then keep this away, and this away from your heat gun for obvious reasons. And just so you know, what I'm doing here is I am starting on one side, keeping this moving, keeping it hovering nearby but moving until I notice the milkiness start to turn clear. All right? And then I'll keep on moving, because it's a buildup of heat. If you just keep going back and forth over the whole thing, it's going to take a lot longer, because you're trying to build the heat up hot enough to cure that little bit of clay. Can you see the difference? How this side looks versus the other side? And of course, there's going to be wetness on your tile. You can just give that a quick little shot and scrape it off with a cutting blade from time to time to get rid of some of that buildup. All right, so we're going to look this all over, and there are areas where it starts to bubble a little bit. It's always hard to tell exactly if you're getting it just enough or too much, but you kind of get a feel for it as time goes on and as you are working with this, so no worries. The next thing I want to do now is sort of make sure that this edge is sealed. And this is a little, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a blob of clay, a liquid clay here. And remember, this is liquid clay, it's not glue, so it has to be heat cured. It will not just air dry. So I'm going to get a little bit of this now and kind of come along the edge here. And the reason I'm doing this is if that edge isn't sealed, then over time that can kind of gap open, and the two parts of your wing can sort of come undone, which is tacky. I've done that before with other materials enough to know, like, ooh, that's not the preference. So I'm going to kind of do this a little as I go along. See how I've got that little ridge there? And just sort of dry it a little bit as I go. Now you probably can't tell just from the angle of the video that we're doing here, but what we're going for is you're going to watch this stuff turn from milky to translucent. Now there is a version of liquid clay that's clear, and so if you're using that one, of course, then you'll watch it turn clear. This is going to turn milky, but it is by contrast clearer than this milky stuff, and that's what you're looking for. Now, because we're not putting this in the oven, the rest of this guy is going to be made out of epoxy clay and, you know, mosaic-y bits, where this is the curing process. So if you don't get this cured, it won't be finished. It's not going in the oven. All right? I'm just going to keep on going and get those edges until the edges are done all around. All right, so the back has got a layer of liquid clay on it, and I'm just kind of looking in the light to see if there's any areas that are not completely filled, and I'll give it just a little hit anywhere that looks light. And the back's only going to get one layer. So I just want to make sure everything is covered. And it looks like almost everything is. Okay, so now we're going to go on to put some liquid clay on the front side. Then we're going to start designing it. But now is a good time if you want to add any curvature. Because remember, the wires are in there. Nothing is like firmly encased completely yet. So now might be the time to give it a little bit of an upturn if you want. And we'll just do the same process of adding on our liquid clay and doing the curing. And I'm just going to do one side at a time now. Also, if you get some liquid clay on the back side, you're going to have to go back and touch up the heat gun over there too. So just kind of pay attention to all of it and just have a fun time. And don't forget to get outside of your area from time to time and go breathe some fresh air, okay? Because you are releasing plastics and you want to make sure that that is not something you're just sitting around and inhaling. Okay, so it's done, and it's got its coat on the back, coat on the sides, coat on the front. It's ready now to start decorating the front. Now you can decorate front and back. That is completely up to you. It sort of depends on where you're going to put this. If it's up against the wall where you're not seeing the back side, you may not want to do much of anything back there. If it's going to be positioned in a place that is going to be visible from both sides, then you may want to do something front and back. And there's a number of things we can do. We can paint on it. We can draw on it. We can use markers. We can use pencils. We can cut things out of paper and glue them on. And we're using our liquid clay as our sort of glue if we're attaching things, and our coating to, you know, seal in whatever decorations we're doing, okay? So I'm just going to gather up a few things and kind of see where we want to go with this. Okay, so the first thing I think I might want to do is put a little white on here. There we go. So what I'm doing here is I've just got another flat brush, a different one, and I am putting just a little bit on the tip. And you can have a wet wipe nearby so you can get rid of it if you don't like it. And I'm just gonna kind of bring a little bit of that white from the outside edge in. So see how that looks? And it kind of like adds to the artsiness of it, which I like. Because I am not going for realism, you might have guessed. I like making things the feel of what they are. I mean, nature already exists. It's already great. I don't need to copy it. Not that there's anything wrong with it if that's what you prefer. I'm not trying to criticize that. For me, I don't feel that need to try and make something look real. What I want it to do is look believable. That's interesting to me. So what I'm doing is I'm adding just a bit more, only just sort of up on this one edge. How about that? What do you think? Let that dry, or we can hit it with the gun. Probably like that. Okay, so I'm making this up as I go along. This is my pan pastel, and I'm taking just a little makeup sponge, and this is dry now. I'm going to just put a little bit of this on, just to kind of tint it, so that white has a little bit of a blue to it. So see the difference? That's kind of nice, huh? All right, so now I've got my pile of possibilities over here, but we're going to have to do another layer of liquid clay to seal in the paint we have so far, seal in the powder, although the powder may move a little bit when we add the liquid clay. That's just sort of an inevitability. And we're going to start adding other details on there while the liquid clay is wet. So I'm going to coat the whole thing so I can kind of work symmetrically. Am I? Or am I going to just do one side at a time? You know what? I'm going to do one side at a time because I don't want to get myself too far ahead of the game and have a giant mess on my hands. It is sometimes easier if you work both sides at the same time to keep it looking like matched, because that's kind of important when you're doing something. So it should look balanced. If it's not 100% symmetrical, that's okay as long as it looks balanced. I'm going to get a little bit of extra clay over here, or liquid clay over here, and get my brush here and spread that out. Right. All right, so now we have this. So what are we going to do with this stuff? We're going to use our needle nose tweezers and our scissors and various little bits and pieces here and see what we can create. I'm going to try and just place things in such a way that they can create almost like the veining, also being decorative. And I think one of the ways it works the best for these threads and stuff is if they actually get a little bit coated first so that they can grab onto the surface. So I'm going to put my liquid clay kind of on this string completely. And we'll cover it over again, but this gives it a little bit more grab. Otherwise it's harder to make it stay put. And we are going to have to cut it, so keep your wet wipe around to wipe off your tools and such as we cut things. So now I want to decide, okay, exactly what do I want with this? Do I want it to just be, you know, headed up like this? Do I want it to curve around and do something fun? I think going off here might be interesting. So let me just cut that there. And decide if I just want that off the edge. And the nice thing about that is I can make these things just go off the edge like this for now, and then trim them a little bit more later. But I do want to make sure that they touch and that there is plenty of liquid clay around so that they're attached nicely. We'll add more as we go because we're still working with that thin. You know, thin is better. So I just want to make sure this grabs nicely, and then we can put more on later. And then I want to get some of this fun hot pink here. How's that so far? I think we need one more bit of color in here. Should we go for a little bit of a thicker yellow one again? Okay, what do you think about that? That's pretty fun, right? Now I can keep adding stuff at this point. Keep adding like the little stars that I've got going on here and other things, or I can dry that one and put another layer on. It's really just kind of depends on what mood you're in, how much you want to build something up. I'll go ahead and put a few of these little stars on here. All right, I'm gonna heat gun that a bit. Okay, so now I can trim those edges. And I'm trying to trim just the threads and not the cardboard or paper. We'll go back and put more liquid clay and all of that to seal that down. And then I want to look it all over and see, okay, what else does it need? Looks like those little stars held up great. Added a little bit of fun. I also had some of this little mylar confetti if I wanted to do that instead of the stars, but I like how the stars look. They're very different and unusual. So now I want to decide if I want to add any more color to it. Do I want to use any of this paper. This is a fun little bit of marbled paper. I could rip a little piece of this and see what it looked like added. So this is a fun little something that could add a little bit more, and I could do that here on the outside edge or in the middle, making it a little bit darker in the middle section, which might be fun. So let's see, let's get a little bit more liquid clay to play with, and I'm gonna put some of that on top of this. In fact, you know what, while we're at it, let's just go ahead and cover this whole thing up with a good layer. That adds kind of a nice look. So I'll put a few of those in there. Okay, what do you think? I think that looks pretty good. All right, you think we can capture the same look on the other side? I think we can. Let's try. Everything on the front is cured. I've checked it all over, no gooey spots. I'm going to give the back one more go over just in case there's any little bits and pieces of liquid clay that got back there, and the wings will be done. Okay, there we have our lovely little wings. Ah, I love how that turned out. All right, so now we're ready to assemble the body, and let's take a quick little look where we're going with this again. We're just gonna have this nice round fuzzy maybe body, or just something kind of fun there with some stripes on the butt and something fun here, some nice big eyeballs. All right, so we're gonna have a nice round body, and I'm gonna use epoxy sculpt for this. Now I've got the larger pound size. It comes in a lot of different sizes, and epoxy sculpt is my epoxy clay of choice. I love this brand, and it's essentially 2 parts, mix them together equally to create this putty that we can stick all of our stuff in, and then it will dry within 24 hours, rock hard. And the point is that we have like maybe about an hour to play with all of this while it's still moist and sticky, and then it will slowly get stiffer and stiffer, harder and harder to shove wonderful little bits into, and then eventually it will harden all the way, which is lovely because it's just such a great material that lets us put all kinds of extra little things in and create wonderful little designs and assemblages, which is what we're doing. So I'm just scooping out 2 equal parts, and there's a base and a hardener, or boy, I don't even know what the 2 parts, part A and part B. And the one part is colored, in this case the black, and sometimes, you know, it's white or blue or green, you know, comes in a number of colors. I usually have just the black and white because I use powders a lot to create additional colors or tints in between the edges of where the details of the mosaic aren't. So I have a lot of fun with that, and black and white is all I ever really use. But a lot of people have other colors that they like, and of course this company makes other colors, which is lovely. So use whatever you want. You may decide you want to do a purple thing, so you can use, I think they probably have a purple. So I'm sort of just eyeballing 2 equal parts here, and you can use scoops and get it just exact. And I usually tend to eyeball it. I'm working on a piece of silicone, as we talked about. Any non-stick surface is going to work out just fine. And then I'm going to thoroughly mix these two together. And you'll notice that I'm using gloves, non-stick, not non-stick, non-latex gloves. So I think these are nitrile or something like that. But anyway, they're just, you know, regular disposable gloves. Because this part's very sticky and you're really having to get your hands in there. I mean, look at how much residue is here just from the mixing. And you don't want that to go all on your skin, right? So use the gloves to mix it up. And you want to mix it thoroughly. You want to make sure that there's no discernible part A or part B. It's all just one nice homogenized mix of whatever color you chose. In this case, I chose black. And what I do is I basically smush it and fold it on itself and then kind of roll it, see where we're at, and do it again. I usually mix this for about a minute, make sure it's thoroughly mixed. You don't have to do it more than that because the friction of your hands is going to warm it up, and when it gets warm, it cures a little faster, and I want it to be just as much sticky time as we possibly can. And then I'm going to take my gloves off and use my fingers from here on out, but I always make sure that I have a wet wipe nearby so that I can wipe off my fingers and my tools as I go along. All right, good to keep any kind of residue off your fingers if you can. So you can decide how you want the shape of this to go. Basically, you can sketch it out if you want. I'm going to eyeball it because I do that a lot. And I'm going to start off with a circle, kind of turn it into a bit of a, more of an oval, I guess. And this is going to be on the bottom. Then the wings are going to go on top of this, and then the second half is going to be on the top, all right? Sorry, I keep dropping this on my wings. How silly of me. So this doesn't have to be very thick because nothing's really going on here. This is just the bottom that everything else is going to be on top of, so it's a base for the sculptural elements. And I'm just kind of making a ovally shape and imagining the wings covering it. Now you see how wide I'm getting, which sort of works for the size of the bug, but it also, you know, hides some of that wing. So I'm going to just make that a little bit narrower. Let's see how that looks now. I feel like that's pretty good. So we're going to have sort of a head area up here, and then a nice big body. And I'm going to put my butt part down there, just like that. So you want to try and take a moment to make sure that that's centered, everything looks good, you like the shape of it all. And we're going to work, basically, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to work the bottom first, then we can add that center bit, and then the head. And, you know, if that way, if our clay starts to get a little too stiff, I can mix up new stuff, and we kind of work a little at a time. So I'm going to make a nice big rounded ball for his little buttular area. And that's going to just fit right on top of that bottom. So I'm kind of making like a hamburger bun. This is the top bun to go in that bottom bun. So see what I'm doing here? Kind of coming right up to the edge of the wing. And sandwiching it in just a little bit, but this is going to be the main body. Now, if you're able to look at the sides, which you can't from where you are standing, but if you were able to look at the sides, what you'd see is the little line where the two join. So what I'm going to do is take one of my tools. This is the Wow It's Awesome tool, and I'm going to kind of just tuck the bottom one a bit out of the way, so it's a little bit cleaner, and that top can just sort of fold on down. It's no big deal because you don't really see that spot, but I find that if I just tuck that bottom in a little bit, then I can just push the top down over it, and it has a nice finished look. All right, so now we have a nice little bug bottom that we can start to decorate. Yay! Don't forget, clean your tools, clean your fingers. Okay, so the fun of having stuff that's already strung up is that it's doing all the work for you. And you can just add strands of things on here just easily by draping the beads directly on. So I've got some stuff that I found like at a thrift store, and we can sort of cut it apart and use it as we go. And then I've got these little things that grab the ends of our threads and kind of keep everything from flying all over the place. So when we're talking pollinator, generally speaking, we're thinking butterflies or bees, right? So I'm kind of making this stripy because I'm thinking about bees. And so I've got some orange, some white, some black, and some pink. I think that could be really fun. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to start just making this whole thing striped, and it may turn out that that bit in the middle covers a little bit of it, but I'm not going to worry about that too much. And I think I want this piece here to be pretty prominent. So let me cut this. Because I may only use just one of this. And like I said, this is the silver silk, which is a fun little feature. And part of what I want you to know about all of this is we just get to use all the things, right? We just can use every single thing that we have. Everything will stick into epoxy clay. About the only things that don't are plastics. And, you know, and there's even ways to play with that. For example, the wings, as you know, are covered with liquid clay, which is a plastic, right? But because we're going to completely encase it, it'll be held into place without any problem. So there's ways around it. So what I'm doing now is I'm taking the ends and kind of tucking them down and underneath. This one's a little bit bigger, so it's going to take a little bit more pushing. I just want to kind of mush that down there. And after this thing is all done and dried, then we can go on the back and, you know, clean up any little bits that might need better refining. But let's just get that one on first. And then I think I want to do like an orange. Now this is curved, which will present a little bit of a challenge. And I started sort of in the middle so I could keep everything kind of straight. I'm going to just take that out there and press that into place. And what you want to do when you're adding all these elements is you want to push them in enough so that they grab. And as you push, you know, it might force something else out on the other side. That just happens sometimes. So, you know, just be careful with your pushing. Use your tools, use your fingers. And sometimes when you push one thing in, you might have to go back around and push something else out of the way that got moved or back into place or whatever. And I'm using a combination of needle nose tweezers and fingers and whatever other tools amuse me to make sure everything is good. I want to have some black as well, little black strands. So I'm going to do a little black strand as well. And what I do is I hold it with these tweezers so that I can keep the thread taut. And that will keep the beads from having gaps in them. And then I can go back and just push whichever ones need to be better into place. So see how I'm holding that, and that's keeping the pressure on the strand, and I push as I go so I can embed it and have as little amount of distortion as possible. Now I also have some of these bigger orange ones, and they're not strung up, so I can just add them one at a time as if they were. See how nicely this ties in with the wings and the colors that we've used for the wings. Nice, huh? And I think, as I mentioned somewhere along the way, whatever color you've chosen is great. Like I've just chosen this orange and pink thing because those are colors that I had around, and I like those colors, and it felt cheerful and happy, and it worked. But, you know, since this pollinator is not trying to be anything in particular, you could make it any color that amuses you. And you can make as many of them as you want out of any colors that amuse you. I love that about art. There's very few rules. Okay, I'm going to turn this around so I can look at it from this side. See if there's anything amiss here. Okay, I think we're looking pretty good. Okay, the little bottom is done. We're ready to work on this next bit. All right, so I'm going to take another little ball of our mixed up stuff and going to kind of flatten it out into another little hamburger type oval. And let's see if it can fit right in there. Oh, I think that works good. So you see what I've done is I've come up to where those beads are. I've covered over the wings, and then I've left the spot where the head's going to be. Now, that's actually, I think I'm going to have to make this a little bit bigger because that's actually leaving quite a lot of space for the head, and I kind of don't want that much. In fact, I think I'm going to take a blade, and we're going to get rid of some of this. It's a little more than we need. So I'm just cutting with my blade over here and just eliminating just a bit of that because we're going to put something on top of it in just a minute. Now you might have already done yours the perfect size, but as I'm looking at this, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger by using those extra little bits. Put it back in that same shape that I had, which was good. Kind of a little bun. Now it's going to be just a bit bigger, and I want to make it rounder too, so kind of like this shape. And let's see, turn it right side up again. That is going to go right where it was and cover up that whole area. That's a little bit better proportion. So you see what we've got? It's like 2/3 the size of this bit here, and then it just leaves just a little bit in the head area. And you want to trim this away so that I can just cover this up with one last bit of clay for the head. And this is kind of the proportion that we're going to look at there. So just a little bit sticking up, not much at all. Now, if I'd known exactly what size to make it when I start, then I would have told you that. But sometimes it's just sort of as you go along and you can tell, okay, I need to do a little bit more here, a little less there, or whatever. It's kind of a work in progress. And I think that's kind of always the way it is with art, don't you? So we want to put a head on here, but we don't want the head to be too big because then it's just too buggy. But we're going to look at kind of like a little oval that goes into place right here. See how that looks? And it's covering up everything that was there. So I don't know if you can see, but there's a little bit of extra goo on the side, like where a neck would be. I'm just going to push that out of the way. Other side seems to be okay. Press that into position and look it all over, make sure everything looks good, which it does. So now I'm going to put on the little eyes. So what I recommend for eyes, and what I've got here, is a couple of like interesting stone cabochons. And these are charoite, I think. And they're big enough so that when they get placed, easier said than done apparently, they're going to be a nice big insect eye. And I really want those to be on the side of the head. And I want to push them in so that they just look like the little round buggy bits sticking out. How's that? Cool, right? All right, so now what I want to do is I want to make the little end of the tail and the head a little fuzzy. So what I've got is I've got a scratch tool, and I am going to use, it's just basically a bunch of really stiff wires. I'm going to use that to kind of pull on this clay here and make little brush strokes, one on top of the other, to make it look fuzzy. Because a fuzzy pollinator is a cute pollinator. And, you know, some people don't really like a lot of bugs, so we haven't put legs and things like that. Now, I don't mind it, but, you know, I know some people are a little squeamish about that, so I want this to be a very cute, fuzzy pollinator that would make everybody super happy to see it. So there's his little fuzzy buns, and I think we're going to do the same for his head. Now, a lot of times the head is fuzzy, and sometimes this middle section is fuzzy, but for now I'm going to do the head, and then we may also make that middle section fuzzy before I start adding some details in there. So let's just see. Let's start with the head, and you see I'm doing is just I'm pulling it towards the front. I'm going around the sides. And let's pull it up from the bottom too, so it can kind of meet here in the middle. And just go slow. Sometimes I push it down, sometimes I pull it up. It takes practice, so don't worry if you don't get it the first time around. A light touch is better. You're just making sort of a texture there, okay? So see, now what we've got is a little fuzzy, and I'm getting any little bits that are sticking out too much covered and pushed down. And make sure you clean your tool, because that stuff stays in there. So now we have some choices. I've got a bunch of these little like sequins that I was thinking of putting in the middle there. I also have a whole bunch of just black beads and black, what are these? These are chatons, so they're a rhinestone. And that could be what we end up putting in there. Let me get a little scoop of these. So rhinestones might be really fun with an occasional couple little flowers in there. I've got some head pins that we could do an antenna if we want, or not, or whatever. But we're just going to kind of look at that and go, all right, what do we think we want to do? I'm kind of leaning towards the rhinestones. I think that would be kind of fun. We could just do regular old beads, but I kind of think the rhinestones, and then maybe we'll see if a couple of those little flowery bits somewhere look good. I don't think we need to do any fluff because we're going to just put a bunch of rhinestones on. So I think we're going to be okay. And all you do with this, and these are chatons, you can use, you could use flat back crystals, you know, whether they have heat set on them or not, doesn't really matter. You could use just sort of like rounded stones, like the round cabochons if you want. I've just used these flat black, and that's all they are. These are probably like a little vintage ones, and I just sort of pick them up with this tool and put them into place, and we're just going to put that all over, a mixture of sizes, and I want to place them with the tool and then press them in with fingers or another, you know, another tool, because this wax can get, you know, mushed if you use it for the pressing down tool. So let's just cover that whole centerpiece with these, and if you want to start like with the big ones and then work all the little ones around them, great. If you want to just, you know, go both at the same time, it's kind of up to you. This is a sort of a Zen thing, and sometimes your eyes can go a little crisscross because you're putting black on black, so that can be kind of weird, but I like it. I think it's going to turn out to be a nice little pattern all around. Now don't forget that epoxy clay is air dry. So once you press things in, it's just going to naturally dry. You don't have to do anything. It doesn't have to be heat set. That's why it doesn't matter if these are heat set rocks or not, or glass, because it's just an air dry thing. It doesn't need any glue. All right, what do you think? Doesn't that look great? Oh, what fun. Okay, so look what I added. This tiny little flower thing. You want to see what I did? Let's do it. So what I did is I've got these little ball-tipped bits, and I've got some of these little sequins that have a hole in the middle, and they're shaped like flowers, which are awesome. And then I'm going to grab a couple of these tube beads. Okay, so I'm going to take my head pin, I'm going to put my flower on it, and then grab one of these tubes, put that in it, and then trim away that extra. And let me show you what I have. So I have the ball tip, the sequin, and the little head pin, and that helps, I mean the little tube bead, that helps make it stick up above. And I'm just pressing some of these in here and there. Won't that be cute to put a few of those around? So we're going to do that next, and then we'll see about antennas. Whee! Okay, so there's an antenna. Let's do the other one. So I'm just getting one of the ball tip tools and just putting an assortment of the glass beads. Just right here beside the eye. There. Oh, look how cute that is. And if you wanted to have a little, nod towards a stinger or something like that, we could do a little something down at the bottom. There, that's cute. Little pink. All right, what do you think? Look at how cute is that. Fantastic. So now we're just going to let this completely air dry. And when it's all done, we'll peel it off of its little silicone. We'll take a look in the back. We'll add anything we need to reinforce things or whatever, and then we can put our little hanger back there. Yay! All right, let it dry. It takes 24 hours to completely cure. Our perky little pollinator is done. All the epoxy clay is dry. And now we can turn it over and see what we need to do to tighten up any areas that might need a little extra epoxy clay, and then add the hanger. So I've already mixed up a bit more of black epoxy clay, and this is the area that we cut away, and it's a little bit rough, but it doesn't seem like it needs much. To me, I think it's fine as it is, but you'll notice here where we tucked in the edge of that silver silk wire and some of these beads here, it probably could use just a little bit more epoxy clay on the edge there to make sure that none of that stuff would come off or get pulled out over time. So I'm just going to put a little bit there, make sure that it's not visible from the front. And the same over here, just grab that with a bit more clay. And you may have other little areas that need to be repaired or reinforced or whatever. And that's what we do now once everything is done. I find this the easiest way to do it, because we get all of the creativity part done and make sure that we have it the way we want it visibly from a design standpoint, and then we can come back and add whatever else is needed. So I have my little bit of 20 gauge wire here, and I've just bent it into a little hanger. And I'm going to go ahead, even though it's not 100% necessary, I find it's helpful just to bend the little ends up into like little feet, little hooks. And this will just make sure that it is very firmly attached and doesn't pull out when you go to hang it over time. So I'm going to take a little ball of epoxy clay and sort of flatten that and put this in there. Actually, I'm going to put this directly on the back. And then stick this in there. I think that'll be much easier. There we go. And then I'm going to take another little bit and put it right over the top and essentially sandwich those wire ends in there. And this is a perfect spot to sign it. So you can put your initials there and sign your piece, because good artwork always should be signed, right? So I'm going to just put a little initial in there. And it's also got my thumbprint. So double sign. And sometimes I'll even put a little bead or crystal or something in there just for fun. Okay, we'll let that dry completely, and then it is all done and ready to hang up. Fun, right? Yay! So I wonder where your perky little pollinator is going to live. On the wall, on a plant, some other place. I hope you have fun with it, and I hope it brings you happiness and joy, as all creativity should. Bye!